Now the news from the Voice of America. Some normalcy in Cairo, but still tense. Chinese political corruption trial to begin. I'm Christopher Cruz reporting live from the VOA News Center in Washington. Egypt's capital, Cairo, was calm but tense Sunday. A few signs of normalcy returned to the city. Some cars were driven on the streets, and some stores and banks reopened. But the military's top general warned that deadly violence could spring up again at any time. Pessin is our man in Cairo.
It was Cairo's quietest day since Wednesday, when security forces began their crackdown against supporters of the ousted president, who had been occupying two public squares. More than 800 people have been killed in the crackdown, including some members of the security forces. Protest leaders canceled two marches scheduled for Sunday, claiming snipers had been deployed along the planned routes. Meanwhile, the interim government installed by the military after the July 3rd ousting of President Mohamed Morsi met in part to discuss a proposal to force the country's largest Islamist group, the Muslim Brotherhood, to disband. Pessin, VOA News, Cairo.
Also on Sunday, the Interior Ministry reported 36 members of the Muslim Brotherhood were suffocated by tear gas as they tried to escape from prison in northern Cairo. The European Union says it will, in its words, urgently review its relationship with Egypt because of the recent deadly violence in that country. It says it is the responsibility of Egypt's army and temporary government to end the violence. After months of delays, a 20-member team of United Nations inspectors has finally arrived in the Syrian capital, Damascus. They will spend 2 weeks in the country trying to determine if chemical weapons have been used in Syria's civil war. The inspectors will be looking only at whether the weapons were used, not who may have used them. The government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and rebels fighting the government have accused each other of using sarin and other toxic nerve agents. You are listening to the news from the Voice of America in Washington. Chinese state media say the corruption trial of former senior Chinese politician Bo Xilai will begin Thursday. The Xinhua news agency says Mr. Bo's trial is considered a test of President Xi Jinping's campaign to crack down on bribery. Political observers expect Mr. Bo will be found guilty because the prosecutors and judges are all controlled by the ruling Communist Party. Russia's Far East is suffering the worst flooding in more than a century. Thousands of people living near the Amur River, which forms the border with northeastern China, have been forced to flee. Russian officials say 17,000 people had been evacuated by Saturday. They warned that could rise to 100,000 in the coming days. Filipino rescue divers have been fighting rough seas as they continue their search for at least 80 people still missing 2 days after a passenger ferry accident off the coast of Cebu province. The accident happened late Friday, about 2 kilometers offshore. Simone Orendine reports from the Philippine capital, Manila.
To Go Group, which owns the Aquinas, says upon impact, the vessel's crew ordered everyone to abandon ship and handed out life vests. Survivors say hundreds jumped overboard and local fishermen helped rescue some of them. Coast Guard officials had said the investigation would start once search and rescue operations were completed. However, Transportation Secretary Joseph Emilio Abaya says his department's maritime industry regulating body already issued fleet-wide suspensions of safety certificates for both shipping lines. Abaya says the official investigation is expected to begin within a few days, and depending on findings, whomever is at fault could see a full range of penalties. Simone Orendine for VOA News, Manila.
38 people died in the accident, but hundreds of the more than 800 passengers and crew members were pulled safely from the sea shortly after the ferry collided with a cargo ship and they jumped out of the ferry. Canadian police have seized 40 pythons from a motel room in the town of Brantford, which is about 100 kilometers from the city of Toronto. The snakes were as big as 130 centimeters long. They were found in plastic containers. The Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals says the snakes were in overcrowded conditions and didn't have enough water. It's illegal to have a python in homes in Brantford. Last week in eastern Canada, 2 young boys were killed by a 4-meter-long python as they slept. That's the news at this hour from the Voice of America. For more on these and other stories from around the world, around the clock, go to voanews.com. I'm Christopher Cruz, VOA News, Washington.